There is a number that gets repeated so often it has become a kind of trivia reflex. Ancient humans lived to around 30 years old. This number is technically true and almost completely misleading at the same time. The popular image this conjures, a 30-year-old hunter-gatherer collapsing from old age, gray hair, creaky joints, the whole package, while everyone around them treats this as entirely unremarkable, is almost completely wrong. So let us actually take this number apart. The first thing to understand is the difference between life expectancy at birth and life expectancy at a later age. Life expectancy at birth is an average. It takes every single person born into a population, including those who die within their first hour, and averages their age at death across the entire group. This average is extraordinarily sensitive to infant and child mortality. Here is a simple thought experiment. Imagine 10 people. 5 die before their 5th birthday. The other 5 survive childhood and live to 70. What is the average life expectancy at birth? The math gives you roughly 36 years. But notice what this completely fails to communicate. Half the population lived to 70. Nobody died of old age at 36. The number describes a statistical average that corresponds to the actual experience of essentially nobody in the group. This is exactly what is happening with the Stone Age life expectancy figures. The low average is driven overwhelmingly by catastrophic infant and child mortality, not by adults dying young. So why were so many children dying? Infectious disease is the biggest reason. And here's the counterintuitive part. Hunter-gatherers living in small mobile bands were actually relatively protected from many of the diseases that became major killers later in history. Smallpox, measles, bubonic plague. These are density-dependent diseases. They need large, concentrated populations to survive. A small band of 30 people cannot sustain an epidemic. The disease burns through, runs out of hosts, and collapses. The agricultural revolution actually made this dramatically worse. Settled villages and cities created the population density that allowed epidemic disease to flourish indefinitely. Proximity to domesticated animals introduced entirely new pathogens. Contaminated water from concentrated human waste created persistent disease pressure that hunter-gatherers simply never faced. The shift from foraging to farming was not, in health terms, a straightforward improvement. The second major killer was childbirth. Maternal mortality in pre-modern populations was staggering, roughly 1 to 2% per birth, which sounds small until you remember that women in these populations gave birth 6, 8, sometimes 10 times. The cumulative lifetime risk of dying in childbirth could exceed 5 to 8%. Something like one woman in 12 or 15 could expect to die as a direct consequence of pregnancy and delivery. Hemorrhage, infection, obstructed labor, conditions that modern medicine handles routinely and that were essentially unsurvivable without it. And then there is the single most underappreciated factor in all of ancient mortality: the absence of antibiotics. A minor wound that became infected could kill you within days. Childbirth infections, surgical infections, pneumonia following a common cold, all of these were genuine death sentences throughout almost the entirety of human history, right up until the mid-20th century. The gap between ancient and modern mortality is not a story about ancient bodies being weaker. It is a story about the specific tools available to deal with threats that have always existed. Now, what did actual adult aging look like for those who survived childhood? Studies of hunter-gatherer populations, both archaeological and from observation of living traditional societies like the Hadza of Tanzania, consistently find that individuals who survived to age 15 had a reasonable expectation of living into their 60s and even 70s. Researchers compiling demographic data across multiple hunter-gatherer groups found something striking. The modal age of adult death, the single most common age at which adults actually died, clustered consistently around 70 to 72 years old. Not 30, 70. Skeletal remains from prehistoric populations confirm this. Osteoarthritis, dental wear, bone density changes. These are the biological signatures of genuinely old people, found in populations that supposedly died young. There is one more thread worth pulling: the grandmother hypothesis. Humans, almost uniquely among mammals, live substantially beyond their reproductive years. The evolutionary explanation explanation is that post-reproductive women provided enormous survival advantages to their descendants through childcare, food provisioning, and the transmission of accumulated knowledge that took decades to develop. If ancient humans genuinely died at 30 across the board, there would be no evolutionary pressure to develop an extended post-reproductive lifespan. Evolution does not maintain traits that never get expressed. The very existence of human longevity beyond reproduction is biological evidence that long adult lives were a normal, recurring feature of our species across deep prehistory. So what has modern medicine actually accomplished? Not extending the maximum possible human lifespan dramatically. Long lives into the 70s were always biologically possible. The actual achievement is more specific. We have dramatically reduced the proportion of people who die before ever getting the chance to reach that natural lifespan. We have not raised the ceiling. We have raised the floor. Ancient humans did not die young because they were fragile or primitive. They died young when they died early because the world was extraordinarily dangerous in very specific ways that we have spent 2 centuries systematically eliminating. The number 30 captures something real and tragic. It simply does not capture what most people assume it captures, and the actual story underneath it is both darker in its details and more hopeful in its implications than the simple myth most people carry around.